Californians have been wondering who killed 86 of their citizens in what's called the Camp Fire, along with dozens of other Californians over the years in other fires. Both federal and state prosecutors are focusing on a likely suspect, Pacific Gas and Electric. But should the corporation have to play by the same rules that everybody else plays with? Joining us to talk about this is Thom Hartmann. Thom, I want to tell us about the significance of the corporate death penalty. What's the history so people understand there really is a corporate death penalty that's been around and we have ignored it. We simply haven't paid attention to it.
Corporate death penalty, Pap, there's also a corporate lifespan. Up until the 1880s and 1890s, every state in the Union required corporations to automatically dissolve after 20, 30, or 40 years, depending on the state. And the rationale behind that was that just like an individual or a family should not be allowed to accumulate massive amounts of wealth over multiple generations simply because they're there. They should be subject to taxation, like, for example, the estate tax. Similarly, a corporation should not be a vessel that can be used to accumulate massive wealth and political power over decades and centuries, that every 20, 30, 40 years, the corporation should shut down, distribute its assets, and somebody else should pick up. And this promoted competition, and it also prevented the accumulation of political and capital money. On top of that, every state up until the 1890s had laws that said that if the corporation acts in a way that's contrary to the public interest, if they kill people, if they accept bribes, if they try to make bribes to politicians, these are the more common areas of corporate law that this was involved with, that corporation itself could get what we refer to today as the corporate death penalty, which means that the Secretary of State of the individual states, all corporations are chartered at the state level. There are some federal corporations like Amtrak, but it's a weird, hybrid thing. So the individual states would simply shut down the corporation. They would do what's called removing the charter, or closing the charter, or denying the charter. The charter is the charter of operation, the legal authority to operate as a corporation.
Thom, it's amazing. We're willing to put human beings to death when they commit crimes. Here we have companies that kill people by the hundreds sometimes. As you know, the very cases I handle are pharmaceutical companies that understand they're killing human beings. They do it anyway. Chemical companies that are destroying entire ecosystems and in the process killing people by the hundreds. And we know who's responsible. You understand? We know management in that corporation. We know who made the decision. We know exactly how we could prosecute them. But more importantly, we know that we should close the corporation down, because there are other people that can pick that up. It's not like they're the only game in town. But I think what's happened so far is the lobby is so strong that the corporation wants to be treated as a person, except we don't want to throw them in prison, and we don't want anything called the death penalty. Tell us why a company, Thom, like PG&E in California perfectly fits the bill as a company that needs the corporate death penalty.
Well, because they've been putting the lives of people at risk. I mean, it's very straightforward. And whether it's putting the lives of people at risk or whether it's engaging in the more, the bribery kind of things, the white collar crime stuff, up until the 1890s, it was routine. A couple thousand times a year, major corporations, significant corporations, got shut down by the various states. In the 1880s, the state of Ohio passed an antitrust act, and John Rockefeller was operating out of Ohio at the time, and Standard Oil of Ohio is what it was called, and he put together this trust which involved multiple companies in multiple states that Ohio concluded was against the law. It was a violation of the antitrust laws, and so they told him he had to leave town. So in the late 1880s, early 1890s, Rockefeller reached out to all the other states. They all had similar laws to Ohio, and said, who's going to amend their laws so that my corporation, can continue to break the law, but it won't be breaking the law anymore because you've changed the law, and Standard Oil can continue to exist as a trust. And New Jersey and Delaware got in this fight, essentially, over about a 10-year period, where each one would lower their standards a little bit, and then the next one would lower even more, trying to get Rockefeller's business. He ended up in New Jersey, but Delaware ended up with the lowest corporate standards in the country, which is why more than half of all the corporations on the New York Stock Exchange are chartered as Delaware corporations. So when you've got corporations that are committing crimes like this, that are killing people, that are bribing politicians and things like this, up until the 1880s, it was absolutely routine for them to be shut down, and they should be shut down. Now it's almost impossible, and in large part because of that seminal moment. It's referred to as the charter-mongering era of the late 1890s, where Rockefeller, and it wasn't just Rockefeller's, Carnegie was Steele, it was the Sugar Trust, it was the Tin Trust, it was the Tobacco Trust, a bunch of these industries essentially that had become monopolized just, took over the states and changed the rules. So now, while every state in the union still has the power to declare a corporation dead or kill a corporation, to end a corporation, it's virtually never done. Instead, what's happening with California is it looks in all probability that PG&E is simply going to declare bankruptcy and then reinvent themselves. The state has the power to shut them down, but I'd be very surprised if they use it, unfortunately.
Tom, thanks for joining us. I don't know that much is going to change. We give this special privilege to these corporations. I don't see it changing much, but it keeps us in the courtroom and it keeps us pushing back every day. Thank you for joining me.
It's great being with you, Pat. Great seeing you again. Thank you.